Larry Tribble is joining us today on the Cool Grandpa podcast. Now, Larry is joining us to both help us understand how leaders can be more productive. You see, Larry's a productivity and a management coach. He's a keynote speaker, and he's focused on helping managers and leaders stay focused on what matters. We're also going to get into a discussion about his father and the example that his father has set when it comes to being a grandfather to adopted grandchildren, as well as what it means to be a parent, be that role model for your adult children. So this is going to be a great opportunity for us both to really learn to enhance and become more productive, or as Larry says, do busy right, as well as listening to touching stories about his father being a grandfather. Before we get started, I do want to remind you that I do have a grandfather coaching program that I'm just launching. And this is a coaching program that is focused, it's short term, and it will be great for newer grandfathers. It will help you be able to really establish a solid foundation for your relationship with your adult children, their spouses, as well as your new grandchildren. For the seasoned pros, this is a program that is great as far as a tune-up goes. You know, we look at what you're doing now, what's working, what might not be working, and we come up with an action plan that's going to enhance your relationship and really focus on building a strong legacy between you and your grandchildren. Now, Grandparents Week is coming up in September, and I know that still seems like it's a far away date, but September is going to be on us before you know it. So what I want you to do is go to the show notes, sign up for Grandparents Week. This is a great opportunity for all grandparents to take advantage of a free week-long series of courses that are being offered by experts in the grandparenting space. You're going to learn more about being a long-distance grandparent. You're going to learn what new parents need from grandparents. You're going to learn all sorts of different skills, tips, and tricks. And this is a free offering that's hosted by Grandparents Academy. So be sure to go to the show notes, click on the link, sign up, and I know I'm going to see you there, and we're going to have a blast during Grandparents Week. So without further ado, let's get started with this conversation with Larry. Hi, Larry. Welcome to the Cool Grandpa podcast. I'm excited to have you on. I want to hear more about your dad and his experience with becoming a grandfather, as well as talking to you about attention and purpose and doing busy right.
I'm excited to be here. I've been listening to your show. I'm a new fan of hearing about the relationship between grandfathers and grandkids. I look forward to hearing more episodes going forward.
Oh, that's awesome. I wanted to first ask you a little bit about your background. Help us get to know you a little bit more. Tell us a little bit about where you went to school and what you do.
I'm a Southerner. I live in Central Alabama, specifically Tuscaloosa, which is Central Alabama for everybody that's listening across the country and world. I've been married for almost 32 years, and my kids are both 23 as we speak, and they've moved out of the house and have started their own careers. We're looking forward to one of the events in my daughter's life, which is she'll graduate college in a week. And so she's been out of the house, but kind of in a student mode, and now she's going to start her more independent life and career. And so we're doing those sorts of things. My background is software development and management. I did that for 20 odd years. And in 2009, after the 2008 thing happened and shook up everybody's situation, mine got shaken up. And I found myself with no job, but a decent sized check, and was trying to figure out what to do. So I entered the PhD program in the business school here at the University of Alabama, and studied and finished my PhD in 2016. For those of you looking at a potential second career, I would say that PhD was a lot of fun, but it will absolutely ruin you for working for anybody else as long as you live. And so after doing that, after working independently for 6 years, I developed my own consultancy. And so now Tribble and Associates is my company. We are the Do Busy Right company. I help people avoid doing busy wrong because we're all busy and doing busy wrong will kill you. And I find that even in business school, where we should learn about being professionals and moving our stuff through in the world, that we're not really taught the fundamentals of managing ourselves, of managing our own tasks, of, business school sort of presumes that you'll have a boss and that the boss will be your guide and mentor and help you manage the things that you need to do. And in the modern world, in the modern economy, that kind of management is increasingly rare as we all work from home, as many of us are solopreneurs, as many of us are advanced in our careers. We get less direct management. We get less being told what to do. And we're more expected to organize our own work and our own affairs. And it just turns out that elementary school doesn't teach you that. I have yet to find a university that teaches it terribly well. And so we kind of have to learn it on our own. And so what I've done is I've studied that process, applied it to myself, applied it to, at this point, well over 100 clients, and developed the attention compass process, which is how we teach people to do busy right.
Oh, yeah. Well, along those lines, we've both seen the shift from the idea that corporations, that when you went to work, you're the new kid out of school, you get into that pipeline, and that the company invests in you. As you start to show potential, you get put with managers who maybe can groom you for next step in the management ladder. But increasingly, probably since the late 90s onwards, really haven't seen that. The saying that a lot of my friends and colleagues have had is that if you want to move up, you have to move out, because companies aren't going to recognize you, aren't going to work on you, aren't going to promote you. So if you want a new challenge, if you want to grow your leadership skills, you actually have to leave the company, and you take all that knowledge with you and you go somewhere else. And so it's become very, very transactional in how we all go about our work for the most part. And there's exceptions here and there and all that. But, it's almost like pensions, right? There's a few of them out there, but by and large, they pretty much have gone by the wayside.
Yeah, I think part of my practice is the study of management, and that's sort of a sideline. And I coach managers and I coach organizations in how to deal with that. But on a personal level, what's happening is much greater independence, and there's a couple of different forces that are at play in that. And I would probably say that the most prevalent force is the growth of knowledge work. So as professional people, as pick project management, for example, okay, you get your own expertise developed in project management. You may be certified, you may not be, you may study, whatever. And so the workplace now sort of assumes that we all are growing in those areas, but is not directly really supporting us. It's kind of an odd time in that we recognize people that work for us want to be independent, but we don't recognize that they've not really learned how to do that. And so I think companies would be well advised to get back into stronger mentorship programs and stronger training programs. But that's got some business cycles in it that we're not in control control of. But yeah, I'm with you. It does seem that, companies' investment in people is not at least what legend had it to be, say, 40 years ago.
Oh, sure. And a question I've got for you too is how are you seeing, let's say, older executives, older workers around the grandfather age, which I'm going to just say 50 and above, and it can be plus or minus. How are
Sure.
you seeing folks like myself managing changes in family, changes in life, and then work with the stress? How is that starting to become apparent?
Yeah. Well, there's a couple of things. One is an underlying part of my coaching is to really think through what constitutes work. So people in our age bracket, I'll be 60 in a month. People in our age bracket are, later career. A lot of people in our age bracket are developing a side gig because we've accumulated this wisdom, and maybe there's a consultancy that we've dreamed of having, or we want to become a coach. We've been working for somebody else for a long, long time, and now we might think, well, I've been making other people rich for 35 years, and so maybe now it's time for me to do my own thing and cash in a little bit on all this experience that I've gained. And again, in our stage of the career, we've developed wisdom in how to manage ourselves and our tasks and our work. But that wisdom doesn't always carry with it a whole lot of structure. And then now, as more mature workers, we're probably less focused on earning dollars and more focused on the other parts of career and life. And so part of my coaching is I think that people don't have a good definition of work. I help people define work as all the things that we do to turn ourselves and our environment into what we want it to be. So part of what we want in our environment is a nice, big, healthy bank account, right?
Right.
Okay, anybody that doesn't want that probably listen to the wrong podcast, right? No, I'm kidding a little bit. We all have varying degrees of that, but we all want, some financial means, and certainly as Americans we do that. But also, as we become this amazingly wealthy society, which we still are, we also think about, okay, well, there's fulfillment beyond just a job. Talking about my granddad, and we'll get into this a little bit. I mean, he worked in the steel mills in Birmingham for his entire career. And that was a very different kind of career and lifestyle than what we're presented with now as primarily knowledge workers as we age in our careers. And then as we broaden our horizons a little bit to say, well, I raised kids. Now I'm facing potentially, potentially retirement, right? And so, now what's that whole thing? I think very few of us now believe that retirement is the complete absence of work in our lives.
Right.
I think we all understand that that's not really a desirable state for human people. But instead, in our retirements, we want to be doing things. Well, what are those things, and how do I manage those things, right? And how do I still move forward with purpose in those areas of life? And I think that's where all this applies to your audience, who are almost by definition going to be quite purposeful about being granddads, right? And so how do we handle that in a way that is not just random and happenstance?
Mm-hmm.
Right? How do we take that role and build ourselves into it and be as successful in that role as we have been in more structured roles like our career?
Right. Right. And I do want to ask you, in your opinion, what's the difference between busy and being productive? Because I think sometimes we can sit there, and I certainly saw this when I was working in a couple of different places. You'd see everybody walking around with laptops and folders going from meeting to meeting to meeting. And, it can look productive or it can look busy, and you might think you're productive, but you're really not being productive. And even at home, we got lots of things going on, and hey, I'm doing dishes, and then I'm jumping on this call, and then I'm doing these things, and all that. So I'm interested in hearing your opinion.
Yes. Well, as humans, we like to be busy. We like to be occupied, right? And if we can't find something to do, then we'll amuse ourselves and distract ourselves. My own particular drug of choice is golf on my television versus golf on the golf course, right? And so we will build in things that will keep us occupied. Add to that our culture has shifted to some degree. So 125 or so years ago, being a person of leisure was a badge of honor and dignity. And now being a person that is simply too important to have any leisure has taken that badge to some degree, right? I mean, when you ask people how they're doing, what do they say?
Oh, I'm swamped. I'm busy. I'm up at 5:30. I'm in bed at midnight, and
Right. And it's this cult of busyness. And we, for many reasons, I won't get into it, but we do tend to equate activity with progress. And that's not always the case. We've all had this experience, I think, in our careers. We get home and we're tired. We worked a full day, you know, and we look back at our day and we go, okay, well, what did I accomplish? It's like, I don't remember. I don't know. There's not something I can point to say, oh, well, the the thing is done. And I think there's lots of causes with that. But we talk about the difference between busy and productive, and it's pretty much what you think. Busy is a gerbil on a treadmill, right? Not getting anywhere.
yep.
And productive is completing tasks that move us towards some state that we want to achieve. And so, there's lots of different components to that, but I'd say at its core, that's really what we're talking about. It's work that helps us in some way do what it is that we want to do in the world, what we want to accomplish. And we have lots of people who are trying to get us to help them do what's going to accomplish in their work. And so we go, okay, well, I'll help. And then that's potentially achieving other people's goals at the expense of your own. But to be productive and not simply busy is to keep in mind your own goals. It's to set boundaries, particularly around your tasks and attention, and to really apply our attention when it's time to apply our attention. Well, and what I mean by that is there are kind of three primary wastes of our attention, and I talk to people about this stuff. The first waste of our attention, or in no particular order, one of the wastes of our attention is interruption. Okay, so your attention is an interesting thing in the sense that once you've given it to something, you're like investing, and as soon as your attention is taken away from whatever it was on, you lose something. You lose your place. A lot of times I'll equate an interruption to, you're reading a book, a paper book, for those of you out there. You're reading a paper book and you drop the book. Okay? Well, what do you have to do in order to get back to reading? Well, you pick up the book, and then what do you do?
Hey, you got to find your page again.
Flip, flip, flip. Oh, that still sounds familiar. Flip, 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 flip. Okay, that's unfamiliar. Back, back, back we go, right? And then we kind of find our location in the book. And then typically what I find myself doing is reading a couple of paragraphs that I've already read so that I've loaded the thought back in my mind, right?
Yep.
And all of this takes time and effort. And the same is true with our own knowledge work. We're increasingly working with our brains instead of with our hands. And so we load these challenging problems up in our skulls, and we're just on the very verge of making some sort of breakthrough, a solution or the next step or something. And then something captures our attention away from that, and all that structure just evaporates very quickly. And it's hard to get back to that. In fact, you may never get back to that same place mentally. And so interruption then is one of these wastes that I talk about. Another primary waste is I talk to people about multitasking. So I define multitasking as not choosing to devote your attention, your focus to a single thing. Okay. Now, I have arguments and debates about whether or not humans can multitask, and I'm trying to avoid that because I have one clear opinion, and there's fully 50.5% of the population that absolutely disagrees with me. And anyway, so the point is not whether or not we can multitask. The point is that multitasking is actually your brain rapidly switching between tasks. Okay, and that's what a computer does. When we think a computer is doing multiple things at the same time, it's actually rapidly task switching. And it took a long time for people to figure out how to build computers that can do that. And we have yet to figure out how to build a human that can do that. And the task switching is this consistent state of quasi-interruption. Okay? And so we bear that cost of interruption fairly consistently when we try to do that. So the first one that we talked about is interruption. Second one we talked about is multitasking. The third one is distraction. And distraction I define as internal interruption. Okay, it's us interrupting ourselves. So when I talk about interruption per se, that's external. That's the world, the environment capturing our attention when we don't intend it. Distraction is ourselves doing it. And interruption we handle pretty well in the modern workplace. Pretty well. It's not great, but pretty well. We have closed doors. We have headphones. We can turn off our phones if we choose to. And so we go to a coffee shop. Okay? And so we can handle interruption pretty well. Multitasking is a decision that one makes. Okay, you may have habits around this, but that's a mindset that we get into. And distraction can be very difficult to manage because distraction is a function of your brain trying to inform you of things that it thinks you need to be dealing with, right? A lot of people will say things like, oh, well, I better do it before I forget about it, right? And that's an indication of dealing with this distraction. And that can be challenging to handle. The way we do that in Attention Compass is we try to get all of those tasks out into the world where we can deal with them as objects rather than dealing with them as thoughts. And that's a process that's really the core of what we teach people when we talk about this. Interruption, multitasking, and distraction. And if we can work to minimize those things in our world, then we can put our focus where it needs to be. And of all the things that focus is very important for, strong relationships are high on that list. Okay.
Yep.
If you want to have a relationship with somebody, the best and most effective way to do it is to give them your attention. your focus and not be talking to them while you're trying to do four other things. And to be sensitive to what they want to talk about and what's going on in their heads versus being fully immersed in what's going on in our own heads, right? You had a podcast episode not too long ago that was talking about, well, what do the grandkids want to do? Well, you got to pay attention in order to figure that out, because if my kids are any indication, anytime I ask them a question, they go, I don't know.
I love that, because I think you can definitely tell, and it may be easier just because of the stage of life, that grandparents can tend to be more attentive with the grandkids at different times. I'm not saying parents can't be, but I also remember myself as a young father where my son wants to talk to me about something very, very important from third grade, but I'm also in the back of my mind thinking about the big presentation tomorrow. Or did I remember to send that email out to socialize the material first, or something along those lines? And I know little kids can pick up on that. And I think that's one of the things where grandparents and grandkids get those bonds, is because grandkids can figure out that, okay, grandma and grandpa are really focused on the challenges that I'm having in third grade. Dad heard me or listened to me, maybe didn't hear me, but dad listened to me. Grandma was, right there with me in whatever those difficulties were.
Well, and I fear that as we become grandparents, we expect that somehow magically, and this is true for a lot of people, right? So their becoming grandparents coincides with their intentional end to the majority of their career. Okay. So we all think, well, once I retire, I'll be able to spend time with the grandkids, right? And that's great if that's your work. But in society, we're working longer. By working longer, I mean to an older age, right? Lifespan, we're more active as we get older than we were 3 or 4 generations ago, et cetera. And I think it would be easy for grandparents to say, well, I'm not retired, so I don't have these huge swaths of time to spend. So how then do I create those experiences? And the answer is avoid interruption, multitasking, and distraction. And how do you put those things away such that when you do apply time to your relationship with your grandkids, that you're also able to apply focus and attention to that?
Oh, I love that. I do want to pivot over a little bit and talk about, and we've brought it up a couple of times, attention compass, and have you talk to us about that and talk to us about that process that you have.
Sure. Well, attention compass is a set of workflows and a tool. So the goal of attention compass is to put us in a position where we externalize all the things that are going on inside of our brain. The problem is, if you do that, it's a ton of stuff. And how do we keep track of it? So a lot of people have this habit of making a daily to-do list, for example. And that's a short-term, very focused example of getting things out of your skull, out into the world. I think it's not the most effective way to do it, and that's one of the things we talk about in Attention Compass. But Attention Compass is an approach to managing our tasks and attention. It's, as I said, 4 workflows and a toolkit. So we build out a toolkit, which is basically a database of all of the things that are on your mind, all of your tasks, all of the reference information that you need to keep up with, your recipe file, and your next great idea for an adventure with your 9-year-old grandson. Okay. Ooh, I saw this thing. We should do that. How do I keep track? And so we externalize all those things into the tool. And then I teach people 4 workflows, 4 work habits. So they are capture, processing, daily review, and weekly review. So capture, I'll go through each of them briefly. Capture is this idea of externalizing in real time. So when things occur to you is the moment that you want to get them out of your skull. Hey, I need to feed the dog. Well, instead of doing it before you forget about it, you want to capture that and then deal with it at a more appropriate time, get back to what you're doing. So capture is this semi-continuous thing that happens, and it has a lot to do with scanning your information sources, email, social media, chat apps, your phone text, your phone messages, and collecting all that in one place. Processing has to do with turning it into what it is. In other words, we take just a minute when we capture and we get it into a place where we can deal with it better. And then 3, 4, 6 times a day, we take a specific 5 or 10-minute break to go into that location and turn these things into what they are, to think about them a little more clearly so that they're not these vague expectations, but we know what our next step is. And then we put that away in a place where we can find it again. Daily review replaces the morning tendency to make your to-do list. Instead, you do daily review against a almost up-to-date backlog of things that you know you need to do. And so daily review is bring that backlog up to date so that you handle priority well. And then you've got your list of things to do. And so daily review is really this, am I current? Okay, great, I am. Now, here's the things that I want to accomplish today. Let's start there. And then weekly review brings that out into the bigger picture so that we don't lose sight of the forest for the trees.
Okay. And then what's kind of the way that people get a hold of you and start working on this process? What do you find are your what are the best clients for this kind of work?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I'm still figuring it out. As you know, right? Who's your target audience?
Right.
I would say that folks who, certainly solopreneurs, folks who have recently made a transition from office work to remote work, folks who really want to get better at what they do. It's an interesting part of work that I deal with, and it has to do with, if you look at professional sports, there's this notion of athleticism. Okay, and if you train a tennis player in physical terms, that's very similar training to the way you would train a basketball player, right? So it's quick change of direction, it's burst speed and not marathon speed, all these kinds of ideas. Well, Attention Compass works at that same level in our workplace, right? It's not, I'm going to teach you how to be a better engineer. I'm not going to teach an accountant how to be a better accountant. What I am going to do is that level that would be parallel to athleticism in sports, which I cannot figure out a term for. If somebody out there thinks of a term, email me, larry@dobusyrght.com, and let me know what the term I'm looking for is. But that level of being good at managing tasks and managing workflow, and that's really where we work. So if you're tired of being exhausted and not effective, then I think that the Attention Compass is your answer. If you look at your world and go, my busy is painful, then that may be an indication that you might be doing busy wrong, and I can help you do busy right.
Oh, that's awesome. I want to take the last few minutes and do a pivot and talk to you about your dad and what you saw his reaction and his interaction with your adopted children was, because it's great to get kind of that other perspective to it. A lot of times I'm asking grandfathers, I'm asking adult grandkids, But sometimes it's great to get that other perspective of like, hey, this is the stuff my dad was doing. This is the stuff my kids responded to. So I'd love for you to introduce him a little bit to us and then talk a little bit about that experience.
Yeah, yeah. You know, my dad's a great dad. He came up in a time when, you know, career was a primary focus. Um, he was born in '43, and so I don't know where that is in the boomer or whatever, but um, he did not manage to get involved in the hippie age. Uh, he and my mom were married at a very young age. I was the second of two sons, and they were 21 when I was born. And so here they are. My dad's in college, and they're living in student housing with two toddlers. And I just remember my own childhood as being, you know, kind of a suburban, you know, kind of ideal, you know, and you know, always look back on my own childhood with great fondness. And one of the watershed events that really happened was my wife and I dealt with infertility and did the medical route for a while, and then decided that our course of action would be to go and adopt kids. And of course, we shared that with our parents, uh, and with my parents, and so it's not like they were surprised by grandkids, right? I mean, they knew that we were going to adopt the kids, but one of the interesting things that happened is that by the time we got our children home, they were 14 months and 20 months. They were had different biological families, and so they showed up as toddlers. So there wasn't this crib phase, right?
Yeah.
There wasn't, you know, there's not any pictures of my mom holding a 2 week old baby, right? And so, you know, they're presented with more or less these full grown little people, and they did the typical grandparent thing. There was one of the early Christmases where they just, you know, the mental image I want you to hold is they backed up a U-Haul truck and unloaded Santa's sleigh. I mean, it was just this flood of things that came into the house. We've always lived nearby to them, and so they've been able to be involved in my children's lives. Even now, they live in Birmingham and I live in Tuscaloosa, and they're about an hour apart. And even now, my kids will on a Friday, you know, hop in their car and drive over to Birmingham to spend the night with Nana and Papa. And I have no idea what goes on. It's a don't ask, don't tell situation. But the fact that at the age of, you know, young adulthood, when they've got lots of things that they do for fun and lots of claims on their attention, they still will make time to go and spend, you know, 24 hours in a chunk with Nana and Papa. You know, one of the things that's really interesting, I think, as a parent of grown children who is not yet a grandfather, is the passing down of parenting, right? And I can talk to my dad about parenting challenges, right? So in one sense, they want to have a very direct relationship with my kids. At the same time, they still have a relationship with me that influences my relationship with my kids. And so, you know, I guess, maybe encourage grandfathers to pay attention to that part of it as well. It would be easy to say, oh, yeah, I've got grandkids, let's go off to the circus, right? And, you know, continuing to help your kids, you know, I'll always be my children's father. And I'll always have a fathering role with them and participate in their lives. And some of that wisdom about, you know, none of us want to be meddlers, right? But we are a primary source of wisdom for our children. And to, be thoughtful about that part of the grandparenting role as well.
Oh, I like how you said maintaining that relationship to father and son, and not just think because the grandkids showed up, now that relationship is totally focused on the grandkids. I certainly have seen that a little bit with me in terms of, having my sons and sometimes even their friends asking, "Hey, how do you go about getting a mortgage?" When they're first time home buyer, you don't necessarily know, and you're gathering information. And then also just the, hey, my 3-year-old's acting this way. What's going on?
Yeah, and sharing those stories and being, you know, uh, I'm trying to prepare for this role as grandparent. It's not impending at this point, but still thinking about it. And it's like, hey, Dad, what did you do? I mean, I was there. So like, hey, Dad, how did you introduce yourself to my prom day? Because I've got to introduce myself to my daughter's prom day.
Mm-hmm.
And the joking mental image is that's when you want to be cleaning your shotgun, right?
Right.
But right, I mean, none of us really want to be that guy, right? And so, hey, what's your wisdom here?
Mm-hmm.
Do you think you did a good job when you did that? You know, um, hey, Dad, you help me pick a college. What can you help me think about when I go to picking my own children's, helping them pick their own college?
Right.
What are some of the issues? And I think that there's a sense in which you as a grandparent can deepen your relationship with your children, right? I'm trying real hard not to get jaded with my own children with respect to, well, will they ever start listening to me? Right? And we've all had this experience raising teenagers,
Oh,
right?
sure.
And then they do come back. I remember, in my early 20s, I hadn't yet realized how brilliant my dad is. And then, kids will show up, and all of a sudden, your kids have kids, and all of a sudden it's getting real for them. And they're looking for wisdom. And it may be a real opportunity for us as parents of adult children to carefully engage and support and say, you know what? Yeah, being a dad can be tough. Here's some approaches. Let's talk about that. Let's open up conversation.
Oh, absolutely. Because I think too, when you think about it in terms of if we're supporting our adult sons and daughters and their spouses, if we're giving them as much wisdom, as much input as we can, and that's also respecting their boundaries, but being there for them, then it can only help the grandchildren out, especially when it's, thinking through a situation or being able to tell them like, hey, guess what? 3 is actually worse than 2. You know, terrible 2s is one thing, but wait till 3 and they're even more mobile and they're even more vocal and they're even more this. Like, hang on to your hats and just, you're going to write it out. You'll be fine. But, here's what's coming.
Yeah. And a real kind of coaching mindset there of, there's so many things. And I guess this is a hazard of the work that I do, because one of the things that I recognize is that people are not trained and coached in this thing that I do.
Right.
Okay. And there are many things that we no longer train and coach people in doing. Being a dad is one of those things. I mean, you go back, a long time, and intergenerational families all living in the same place, right? And so the grandfather, the father, and the son all kind of live together in a lot of cases, or in very close proximity. And so the grandfather could observe the relationship between the father and the son. and was still in communication. Well, now we disperse families and kids will move halfway across the country and that rich communication is not there, but still, recognize that being, let me see how I want to phrase this. Being my father's son and experiencing his fathering does not mean I learned it.
Right.
Does that make sense?
It does, because I think there's a natural, like you said, there's a natural part of rejection that comes into play, especially through the teenage and probably early 20 years, where they're trying to figure out what they believe in. They're trying to figure out their path. It's not my dad's path. And, the joke is like you turn around and all of a sudden you're your dad. Or, with the women, it's, I'm not going to be my mom. I'm not going to be my mom. Holy crap, I'm my mom. And, so you have that, but that's where I think those grandfathers and those multi-generational families kind of came into play, because you had that little bit of a buffer with somebody else from the family that was there to smooth that out.
Well, and holy cow, I'm not going to be my dad is this meme that we've adopted. And there's a particularly, to me, offensive series of ads on TV about young people turning into their parents. It's hard not to get a little bit emotional, but I could do a lot more than turning into my dad. He raised me. I like the life that I have. I like the training that I received. Could it have been better? In theory, I guess. But why would I want to not be a lot like that? I think you did a pretty good job.
And it's navigating and maintaining that relationship to the point where they do start to come back and they do start to listen, and they do that. And so it's like you said, it's almost that layer of coaching where you don't hear a lot of people that talk about how do you maintain that relationship to the point where when they're older children, that they do come back in and go, Dad, talk to me about 30-year mortgages or 15-year mortgages or buying this type of house or that type of house or whatever those decisions may be.
Right. Yeah. And hey, Dad, how did your dad become a grandparent?
Mm-hmm.
How did your dad interact with me? And what lessons would you give me from watching that interaction?
Right.
Right. I thought your granddad, Larry, I thought my father was a great granddad to you, and he did these things. Okay, great. I thought, all of this parenting and all this wisdom. Anyway, the point is, you were saying, they're two now, just wait till they get three. Well, they're 3 through 8. I joke with people, 3 through 8 is about as cute as kids get.
Yep.
Then they grow a mouth, right? Mm-hmm. And it does. It's easy to let that separation happen because you want them to be independent. And then, you look around and you go, okay, well, what have I lost in that relationship? So just like with your grandkids and being intentional about maintaining that relationship, being intentional about maintaining that relationship with your kids. Because what I will say to other parents of children my age is that I have great faith that at some point they will come back to me.
Yep.
And say, hey, Dad, because I did it to my dad. There was a time when I was, fixing to get married, and, I got married late in life. I was 27 when I got married. And I'm like, hey, Dad, I'm in it up to here. What I've already proposed. What do I do? And so I do think that's true. And I guess just not to overemphasize any one part of that 3-way.
Sure. No, that's awesome. Larry, I've had you on for a little while. What's the best way people can reach out to you about Do Busy Right or just get connected with you to learn more about the Attention Compass?
I would love to get emails from folks who are interested. You can reach me directly. My email is Larry at dobusyright.com. Do Busy Right, all smushed together, no spaces, no hyphens. Another way, if you're interested in learning more about the attention compass, I record and publish the Do Busy Right podcast, and it's available on all the major services, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, where we talk about the nuts and bolts of managing our tasks and attention. And so that's a way to find out some more about what all this thinking is and to begin to have some tools to apply to your own situation.
That's awesome. And folks, I know you might be out walking the dog or on the treadmill or something, so I'll be sure to put these links and Larry's email into the show notes. So, Larry, thank you again so much for taking time out of your day and joining us with the Cool Grandpa podcast. I've really enjoyed listening to you and talk about those areas of waste, as well as talking about your dad's journey with being a grandfather. So thank you again.
Yep, enjoyed it. Look forward to hearing from your audience and listening to more of the great work that you're doing as I prepare to become a grandparent.
Oh, well, thank you so much, and have a good rest of the day. I had a great time talking with Larry. I really enjoyed learning more about the attention compass, how leaders in the 21st century with this hybrid work environment or working from home or even being in the office, how we can start to eliminate some of the distractions or waste in our days so that we can make sure that we're doing busy right. I really enjoyed the stories of his father, how he became a loving grandfather to those two adopted kids. It was great to hear the story about the U-Haul truck pulling up for that Christmas and all the presents and everything that his dad and his mom went overboard on when it came to welcoming those kids into the family. It was really touching to also hear the stories about how his father has remained a mentor, has really been able to walk Larry through some of the different challenges and some of just the new experiences of being a father to young kids, to teenagers and onwards into young adulthood. So that was really touching as well. I hope you enjoyed this program, and be sure to like and subscribe wherever you're hearing or watching this program. It really helps us be able to become a little bit higher in the rankings and get the word out about how special and important grandfathers are in the lives of the family. So I hope you enjoyed this, and until next time, remember to stay cool.